Hello and welcome to Rights and Recourse, a program that tackles constitutional, human rights and legal issues, bringing you information and analysis. My name is Dumila Matez. Remember, you can also be part of our discussion today by calling us on 011 714 5497 or 5498 or tweet us at Rights Recourse. Alternatively, you can email your thoughts about this program and many others to rightsandrecourse@sabc.co.za. The National Development Plan says South Africa looks very different from one we left behind in 1994. Yet for many poor South Africans, there is still much that looks the same, highlighting serious shortcomings in our development path while we have made progress in reducing poverty. Poverty is still pervasive and we have made sufficient progress in reducing inequality. Millions of people still remain unemployed and working households live below the poverty line. Many of these are young people who feel the odds stacked against them, as indeed they often are. It is important to understand why these problems persist and how to fix them. This requires a new approach, one that moves passive citizenry receiving services from the state to one that systematically includes the socially and economically excluded. As part of our continued analysis of the ANC policy discussion document destined for their conference in June and July, the National Policy Conference, today we are taking an honest look at what has become known as the radical economic transformation. But first, let's have a look at this insert.
In order to sharpen the ANC's model of socio-economic transformation, a package of decisive policy intervention is required. This package of policy intervention must be capable of achieving the following objectives. The first of those objectives is reducing unemployment and youth unemployment. The problem of youth unemployment must be alleviated by massively increased youth access to vocational training and apprenticeship. A well-designed system of vocational training and apprenticeship in combination with public service youth brigades will save many young people from unemployment and better prepare them with skills needed in the workplace, including entrepreneurial and small business skills. This is a particularly crucial response to the job shedding dynamics of what has been termed the fourth industrial revolution, which manifests is skill-based technological change and which threatens to leave many young people out of employment. Working together, business, government, labor must create up to 1 million internships in order to bring more young people into the labor economy. Returning land to our people and supporting land reform. ANC policy commits government to returning land to our people, and due to this commitment, South Africa's constitution mandates that land reform must take place. The constitution's commitment to just and equitable compensation for the acquisition of land for land reform should be codified and should place market-based evaluations of land. The process must be facilitated and accelerated by the passing of updated expropriation legislation by Parliament. Government should take heed of the Constitutional Court's finding that agreement on the quantum of fair compensation is not a precondition for land redistribution to take place and should never pay a premium in purchasing land for the purpose of land reform. In general, the success of land redistribution will be improved if there is greater oversight over land, farming equipment, technical skills transfer to the beneficiaries of land reform. Increasing black ownership and control. The imperative of ensuring increased black ownership and operational control in the economy must be achieved through a wide range of instruments. Priority must be given to ensuring black ownership in emerging new sectors of the economy, such as the potential that surrounds the development of new gas sectors as large-scale energy sources for South Africa, as well as the potential to take forward new opportunities linked to South Africa's ocean economy, as revealed through the work of the Operation Phakisa.
Well, to discuss today's topic, we are joined in the studio by Minister Gugi Nkwinti, Honorable Minister of Rural Development and Land Reform, who is also Deputy Chairperson of the Economic Transformation Subcommittee of the ANC. Professor Chris Malikane, from Associate Professor of Economics at Wits University, and Dr. Herbert Maseramula from the Department of Public Management at Tshwane University of Technology. Chairman, good afternoon and welcome to Rights and Recourse.
Thank you very much.
The first question, listening to Mr. Godongwana there, it sounds as if he was reading a preamble from the RDP document of 1994, where it says, no political democracy can survive and flourish if the masses of our people remain in poverty, without land, without tangible prospects for a better life. Attacking poverty and deprivation must therefore be the first priority of a democratic government. We seem to be back to square one. All these things talk to each other. Is that true? Am I wrong? Minister, you first, probably you want to tackle it first.
No, you're not wrong. Remember that we have a couple of documents which we base our policies on. One of them, which is a very, very, I think it's a very good document, which we're not often using, Ready to Govern. That document was constructed by people who were driving the struggle against apartheid. And they had a clear vision about what future, should replace apartheid. So that's why now and again, when we put together policies, that's our reference document. And so that's why, starting there.
Dr. Herbert, you want to say something?
Yeah, I think it's inevitable that we should consistently start from the beginning, because the challenges that we're confronted with as a country have always been the challenges that we had in 1994. Poverty, unemployment, inequality. So that much is inevitable. But also what is critically important, just to pick up from what the minister is saying, the document Ready to Govern. The fundamental question that we need to ask, 23 years into democracy, is are we really ready to govern? Apart from the fact that we've been in government for all those years, we need to consistently ask ourselves the question, are we really ready to govern? Why am I asking this question? I'm asking that question in the context of various unfortunate dynamics, that are evolving. But those dynamics are not necessarily wrong. I could say that maybe they are part of a maturing democracy. But at the same time also, what needs to be underscored as we navigate our path is the question of the quintessence of public leadership. Because if we can just get that right, I think we can actually arrive at where we want to go, and be able to can confidently ask the question, we are indeed ready to govern.
Professor Malikane, you seem, I hear Dr. Herbert Maseramula saying we should, when we lose our way, we should go back to the beginning.
Yes, and for me, really the beginning is the Freedom Charter, because that document outlines the vision of what we define as freedom in South Africa as South Africans. If we talk about economic transformation, we need to go to the clauses of the Freedom Charter that deals with issues that relate to the economy specifically. The first statement in the Freedom Charter says the people shall share in the country's wealth. And then how are people going to share in the country's wealth? It starts by saying the mineral wealth beneath the soil, the banks and monopoly industries shall be transferred to the ownership of the people as a whole. And these sectors that have been cited in the Freedom Charter are not supposed to be owned by an elite, be they white or be they black. So that's the starting point. So in order for us to unlock the impediments that have held back the ANC from implementing a radical program of transformation, it's that clause. What have we done to banks over the past 23 years? What have we done to the mines and monopoly industries? So yes, it is true that we can create employment through state-owned enterprises and so forth. But if you check the economic relationships between state-owned enterprises and these big companies, you find that the state-owned enterprises find themselves using inputs from the mines, for example, ESCOM using inputs from the mines that are basically charged, the coal that is charged at monopoly prices. Yet this is a national resource that should be used for the betterment of the life of our people. So I think that's the starting point, the Freedom Charter, and then from there we can discuss. Yeah.
Minister, what the professor is saying there to me, what many people might think is a new term, radical economic transformation. He's just saying to me the Freedom Charter actually was the radical economic transformation plan.
That's correct, but let me just explain one small thing here. You know, you remember before we became government, President Nelson Mandela went to Davos with Chief Buthelezi and then President de Klerk. He says he was called, when he was called up to the stage, there was a standing ovation. And when the other colleagues from South Africa were called up, there was just a whimper of a clap. He said, you spoke and he raised this. This is one of the things he said. The Freedom Charter says this about nationalized banks and minerals, etc. And then he says, when I finished speaking, there was a whimper of a clap. And then came Chief Buthelezi, said, actually basically going straight to the market economy, this is what we're going to do. In the capitalist kind of economy, we're going to strengthen this thing. Same with President de Klerk. He says they got standing ovations. So when after that, he called all of us. There was a policy conference. We discussed this matters. We took a decision at that conference that this should be treated as a strategy rather than a principle, so that when the times are right and ripe, then that could be done. The question therefore might be, is the time ripe or not ripe as we speak now? Because that's really a critical question.
My actual question, Dr. Musaramulo, of what do you understand about economic growth and transformation? What do you understand that to be?
Look, I think it's something that we need to begin to adequately look into and think about. And it's quite interesting that you are asking that question in the sense that you'll recall that during the time of GIE, South Africa achieved some degree of economic growth, but that growth was actually criticized as being a jobless growth. What does that mean? It will therefore mean that growth does not necessarily mean that there will be transformation, you know, and because of that, I think it's critically important that when we talk about economic growth and transformation, we must make sure that we influence, you know. That is why it's critically important, and I'm happy that this point is underscored in the National Development Plan, building state capacity. Why that state capacity? To be able to influence economic activities so that they can be directed towards addressing the question of socio-economic justice, you know. So state capacity, state becomes a critical component in terms of influencing economic growth for the purpose of achieving what we want to achieve as a post-apartheid South Africa. Because at the end of the day, we should be able to address the challenging question of socio-economic justice, social equity, and that is where now government must actually come into the picture. That is why I often consistently argue that, look, generally, on average, in terms of our policy, we are excellent. What is lacking is that dexterity at bureaucratic administrative level to translate those policy into tangible programs, you know, that will give tangible outcomes, and that is what I think is likely lacking in our system.
Well, if you'd like to join us in today's discussion, you can call us on 011 714 5497 or 5498, or tweet us at Recourse. Alternatively, email your thoughts about what we are discussing today and many other things that we've discussed before today to Recourse at sabc.co.za. Stay with us.
presumed U.S. drone strike in the south of the country has killed 3 Al-Qaeda suspects.
Death toll in Yemen's 18-month-old civil war now stands at about 10,000.
People get killed or die and are actually buried before they're recorded, and we don't have a way of recording that, but we know the numbers are much higher.
Water restrictions are to be imposed on villages in and around the Nkomazi municipality.
Pumps can't pump the water because there's no water in a river, and if the water is coming back, then it's full of mud.
Those who can pray and those who can do any miracle to make sure that we've got enough rain, give it a try.
Water-wise, water is an essential need. The scarcity of it could lead to loss of many lives, including livestock, plants, and much more. It requires us to use it sparingly and responsibly in times of need, failing which our taps and sanitation will not function. For more on water and weather issues, stay tuned to News Today, every Friday at 4:45 Central African Time. SABC News, making you water-wise.
Welcome back to Rights and Recourse as we discuss the ANC policy that's going to be presented to the National Policy Conference in June and July. Today we talk about economic transformation. Let's take this call from Margaret in Pretoria. Margaret, good afternoon and welcome to Rights and Recourse.
Good afternoon to you, sir, and thank you. Good afternoon to all of the people on the panel. So there's only one thing that I want to tell you. We're trying to go forward. But every panel you hear the word apartheid, they go back. They don't want to go forward. Now you take, for instance, a lady that speaks about Mrs. Zuma. Forget Mrs. Zuma. Look after our president, Mr. Zuma. Don't worry about Mrs. Zuma. She'll pay for what she's done wrong. You know, this is not, they don't want to come right. They carry on and on with apartheid, apartheid, apartheid. Look forward, not backwards, sir.
Thank you, Margaret. Thank you very much, Margaret. I think Margaret seems to be saying, Professor Malikane, you said earlier, we must always go back to the Freedom Charter. And Margaret seems to be saying we shouldn't always go back, hark back the past.
The problem is that the inequalities that are taking place in South Africa have got a historical background. And we cannot ignore that background. The fact that the vast majority of the African people have no land to work on. The fact that the vast majority of black people in general, Africans in particular, are not in powerful positions in the economy necessitates the fact that we need to begin to undo brick by brick what has been set up deliberately by the apartheid government. So we can't not go back. We have to go back with a view to go forward.
Yeah. Minister, the document outlines very clearly that wealth is still concentrated in white minority. The nature of capital remains largely the same, concentrated in the mining finance complex. So how do we break this up?
That's exactly the essence of the radical socio-economic transformation. Let me define it. Because this is
I've been waiting for somebody to define.
Yes, we have defined it because remember, this is a resolution of a 2012 conference
at
Mangaung. And there have been all sorts of perspectives around it, but ultimately we found one another. That it refers to fundamental change in the systems, in the structure systems, institutions, and patterns of ownership, management, and control of the economy. That's a succinct definition. So you can see those elements that need to be attended to. For example, if you look at structure, you have to deal with this question of structure. Included to that dealing with the structure is a question of system, because we're a capitalist system. And therefore you've got your structures, because it's a mature capitalist system in South Africa, and you have this concentration. Therefore you've got two distinct structural challenges, monopoly and oligopoly. Now you have to deal with that if you want to create an inclusive economy. And that's what is the challenge. That's what, therefore, that resolution is about. That's what the definition is dealing with.
Professor Malikane, the ANC adopted, after that discussion at Davos, the ANC adopted a mixed policy system. And several economic plans, starting with the Reconstruction Development Plan, were put forward, the ASKISA, the New Growth Plan. And how do we then extract from these policies what we want to use and what is going to work for the way we live in?
You know, in my view, when the ANC adopted the mixed economy, it was natural that all economies nowadays are mixed. But the question that arises is which aspect, what character of the economy is going to dominate? Is it going to be a private monopoly capitalist domination of that mixed economy, or is it going to be a state-led ownership of the economy? So those are the debates. I think we are at that point now where we say that some of us argue that really we need to expand state ownership of the economy of critical sectors that are supposed to be owned by people of South Africa as a whole, and to transform the ownership of the private sector that will coexist with that state sector, so that black people are the ones that are actually beginning to play a dominant role in that private sector. So we need a state-led economy that is dominated by a black private sector that complements that economy.
That's the difficult part.
Yeah. That's the difficult part, and why it is difficult is because the challenge does have a long history. Remember, and that is the case with most
let me just add something, Dr. Masoro Mula, and that has to do, I've always argued, whenever BE deals were constructed, as government said we should have BE deals, whenever BE deals were constructed, there was never a proviso that jobs must not be lost, jobs must be created. There was never that.
Yeah, and that is part of the critique which is now emerging insofar as our intervention through BEE is concerned. But at the same time also, I think it is critically important, just to go back to the issue that came from Prof, that what we are confronted with is complex, and it is because the problem that we are confronted with, it does have a long history. Remember, it is not just only a uniquely South African challenge, it's the challenge of post-colonial Africa. We found ourselves in a situation wherein the context of our independence happened, particularly as South Africa. It happened at a time when the Soviet Union was actually, the Soviet Union has collapsed. Neoliberalism. Remember, also there were even this American theorist Fukuyama saying that neoliberalism marked the end of history. Blah. So we were compelled by the context of that time to adopt mixed economy approach. We had no option. But that much happened within the context of the colonial apartheid architecture that had long been constructed to dictate the behavior of the post-colonial Africa. So we found ourselves in this complex that was brought to us by the unfortunate history of where we come from. And you'll also recall, Frantz Fanon said something very critically important, that the problem with the post-colonial Africa is that we seem to be, moving from the premise of what you call colonial unconscious. In other words, we think about the future without paying more attention to the history. That is why we will often be confronted with a myriad of contradictions. And I think that as South Africa, we are an excellent case of contradictions as we try to navigate through some of these complexities.
I was going to come to you, Minister. Let's take these calls, two calls following each other. One from Z in the Free State. Z, good afternoon and welcome from Right to Rights and Recourse.
Hi, Mr. Matthias, how are you?
Fine, thanks. How are you?
Fine, good afternoon, Mr. Panel.
Good afternoon.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. No, Mr. Matthias, I'm happy that you are having this discussion today. Actually, I've listened earlier on the live coverage that they had at the Lutuli House. No, just to add more on this radical transformation. To transport business personally, I move cars for rental companies and dealerships. The experience that one is getting from these white-dominated companies is that you go there and approach them to do business. It's so frustrating that the requirements, number one, it's difficult. You are a black man, they don't trust you. I mean, there's a lot. So I don't know. I think to add more on the government side, I think they need, because there's too much business within white corporates. But that business is structured, as you say, is that it's white companies to white companies. You come in as a black person, they don't accept you. And if government is not going to, I mean, to get involved in that, we'll always be having challenges with these white companies, because as I'm saying is that they do develop, but black people are not developing. So all I'm expecting is that if government can really try and see how are these big white corporate companies doing business with black companies.
Thank you very much. Let's take this one other call from Joy from the Northwest. Joy, good afternoon and welcome to Rights and Recourse. There, it looks like Joy is not here. What Buziz is emphasizing is a question of trust. We used to say, I worked in the sports area for a long time, and we used to say it's easy for sports marketing companies that are run by white people to get sponsorship for their sporting events because they play golf together, they were at university together, they were at school together, and it's very easy for them to talk amongst themselves and give each other business.
That's correct. And those are the networks. So when the minister is talking about fundamental change in the systems, these systems are characterized by networks, and these networks are embedded in the value chains. So black people, if you look at black people who are engaged in business, you find that they're isolated. A black person is occupying a particular segment in the value chain, surrounded by white suppliers and white buyers, and another one is situated elsewhere. So what is required is that the value chains need to be studied in detail, and ensuring that unapologetically black people begin to dominate through state procurement and through policies that ensure that black people play a big role in the private sector of the economy.
I'm told Joy is on the line. Joy, good afternoon and welcome to Rights and Recourse. Hello, Joy? Hello, Joy? No, Joy is not there. Let's continue. Minister, President Thabo Mbeki said in his annual State of the Nation address in February 2001, there has been a net gain of 1.1 million jobs between 1996 and 1999. But these jobs were largely in the informal sector. Is this an indication that the economy has not been able to create jobs?
In my view, it takes us back to your initial question of growth.
Is what is the chicken and the eggs?
Exactly. You see, because if we remember, we are too orthodox in approaching the question of change in South Africa. We are still informed by our colonial and apartheid past, particularly colonial past.
Yeah.
Now, we should change, do this thing of growth, and then everything else follows. The so-called trickle-down theory that economists talk about. We should be talking about growth through redistribution. It's a conceptual change. It's a mindset change. We must become unorthodox. And therefore, if we want to achieve formal jobs, we must not be afraid to look at things and say, let us redistribute the resources that are there in order to achieve growth. But if we say we want growth, then we will redistribute, it's not going to work. It is not working. Full stop.
In other words, these two things, growth and jobs, should be are not mutually exclusive. You can't wait for the other one to happen.
You must achieve growth deliberately through redistribution. You must be deliberate in redistribution in order to achieve growth. We're doing it the other way around. The orthodox way. It's not going to work.
What you raised earlier, I don't know whether you want to come in there, Dr. Herbert. I think Professor Malikana raised something which drew us back to 1955, the Freedom Charter. I've asked a question here that says, what is radical transformation? Because if one were to take the Freedom Charter mantra that says the people shall share in the country's wealth in is far from a radical economic transformation. Why? That's exactly what the Freedom Charter is saying. People shall share in the country's wealth, and this has not really happened.
That much, I think it is it is the function of the context within which the post-apartheid South Africa found itself in. Remember, like as I said earlier on, ANC came into power and it was confronted with the world that was configured in a particular way. You know, it was a neoliberal. There was a neoliberal order, and I can just imagine that Mandela, like as the Honourable Minister indicated, I can just imagine if Mandela had actually insisted on that original understanding of the Freedom Charter in a context where the global order is underpinned. You know, the global order is founded on neoliberalism as an ideology. I just imagine where will we be, because the fact of the matter is we are part of the global economy. Whatever that we do will inevitably be influenced by what happened elsewhere. You know, so the challenge that you are confronted with is how do we navigate our way through in the context of the current realities that we are confronted with.
I wanted to come to something else. Let's go to this call from Adams in Cape Town. Good morning, Mr. Adams. Welcome to Rights and Recourse. Good afternoon, I'm sorry.
Yes, good afternoon, sir. How are you doing?
Fine, thanks. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Just 2 or 3 questions for the Minister of Rural Affairs. Hello, sir?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, Minister. How are you today, sir?
I'm fine. I'm fine. How are you?
I'm all right. You don't want to look at me. I'm looking at you now.
Where are you?
Yes. Now I'm on the other side of the wall. I'm in Cape Town.
Yes.
The question 1, I just want to know, why does it take so long to dissolve District 6, the land of District 6? Whereas other land has been issued to the people, it seems like District 6 is as far as I'm concerned, Cape Town is the only place that is struggling to get the people back onto District 6. So I'm not sure if it's lying with the national government or with the city of Cape Town, because one passes the bucket to the other one. So what I want to know, how long it's going to take, still another 20 odd years to get back onto the land, to have a house on the land? What's happening, sir?
Is that all? Thank you, Mr. Adams. Minister, I don't know if you want to answer what Mr. Adams, because we are going to be talking about land reform, because it's part of the whole issue around economy. I don't know if you want to respond to
no,
Mr. Adams.
I think I should. Mr. Adams, thanks very much. We are constructing already there now. We've had the first phase done. We're busy with construction on site as we speak. But I think you are right, the process has been very slow. Part of the problem has been institutional. Remember that until we said people must themselves be involved, there is a District 6 reference group now there, not just the trust. And as a result, the people themselves, I occasionally meet with them. I intend meeting them again this year with them to assess progress. So people are involved. The reason why we were slow is not involving people in the decision making and just relying on the trust. That's the problem. And I don't want to go to other things which could discuss with them there on the spot in regard to some of the dynamics around that.
Professor Malikane, in 2012, Cabinet adopted the National Development Plan with a whole new list of lofty ideas. However, it would seem to me that we do not have an implementation plan. Many people have been saying there's no implementation plan. By the way, you served with the National Development Plan.
You know, I did. You see, the problem is that the implementation plans are there, in my view. Government departments, they've got plans. So every year, when they draft these plans, they hack back to the National Development Plan. So they link up to the National Development Plan. So on the ground, they are implementing what is in the National Development Plan. My problem with the National Development Plan is something different. It has to do with the fact that basically it's not radical enough. when it comes to issues of ownership. It's not radical enough.
It's not like the Freedom Charter.
Exactly. It's not radical enough in terms of the structure of the economy and what do we do with our mineral wealth as a country. So those are some of the issues that, that in my view, need to be looked at in improving this plan.
What is the difference, Minister, between the National Development Plan and the New Growth Plan?
The New Growth Path is supposed is supposed to be the implementation strategy, and then because the plan is a plan is given, then now you have what we refer to as strategic integrated projects on the ground. I'll give you one small one already. Look at Moloto Road. There's going to be, they already started working there, expanding the road, including the plans ahead now on rail. But road certainly work has started there. So that's one of those strategic integrated projects that are based only on the New Growth Path. If you look at the manganese sinter plant rather, from Northern Cape down to the Eastern Cape, a lot of planning has taken place there. Now there's going to be a rail line built from the Northern Cape down to the Eastern Cape, to Kucha in the Eastern Cape, to link this to. So you have quite a number of others. So there is work that is happening in terms of the New Growth Path. The problem, of course, you look at the medium-term strategic framework of government. That's 2014-2019. Actually, if you look at that, those are the outcomes 1 to 14 in terms of the government implementation plan of the New Growth Path, based on the broad plan, which is the National Development Plan. So work is happening. The National Development Plan is being implemented. The New Growth Path is actually the strategy with various projects taking place. It's just that when we articulate, we don't make this clarity.
Well, if you'd like to join us in today's discussion, please tweet us at Rights Recourse or send us an email at rightsandrecourse@sabc.co.za. You can still call us on 011 714 5497 or 5498. Stay with us.
Top 5 rated horse racing event in the world, fashion is a highlight for those in attendance. All decked out in blue and white, the Lomarians Queen Plate is the premier event that kicked off everyone's social calendar.
That was all part of my master plan to cast John Legend but deprive him of his normal instrument and give that one to Ryan.
The House of Truth is not just a name. It is a religion. It is a lifestyle. It is a conviction that drives us.
What really excites me is how people have kept it very simple and also played with the theme, and how each person has interpreted it in their own way.
To stay updated with all the current entertainment news, tune into Trends every Saturday from 12 to 1.
Welcome back to Rights and Recourse to discuss the economic policy of the ANC here today, which is still going to be finalized and be discussed at the National Policy Conference that's taking place between June and July, towards the end of June into July. But let's take this call from Damola in Lagos, Nigeria. Good afternoon and welcome to Rights and Recourse.
Good afternoon. Hello. How are you?
Fine, thanks. How are you?
Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, just a quick contribution. Just looking at the perspective from where a country like Nigeria has been, what Nigeria has been through. in the context of where you are at in South Africa. We've gone through it, and I don't want to take just one sector, oil and gas. It has taken the country pretty much the better part of 4 decades to be able to catch up to the tricks or the understanding of the industry as dominated by international oil companies, or the whites, so to speak. So there is that component of which is the social society that is to take over the redistribution of the economy. Are they ready? Are they aware? Are they responsible enough? Are they disciplined enough? Is there an element of corruption that is there? Corruption being bred by ethnicity, distrust among ethnic groups. When you put all these cocktails together, they usually can be counterproductive, because initially in Nigeria, we adopted the mixed economy in the 60s, and by doing that, without the discipline that goes with it, corruption, ethnicity, tribalism, all sorts of other things came into the cocktail, and the state-owned direction towards policy towards redistribution did not work 40 years down the line. 40 years down the line, our economy is still structurally faulty. So South Africa needs to look at all this throughout the value chains. My brother then spoke about the networks. What are the networks that have been created, for instance, by the Ramaphosas that were forerunners in the UAE? How much of the networks? You can't tell a white man or anybody to ignore his network. They went to school together. If I went to school with somebody, I already have affinity with that person. So it's an issue of how are we going to integrate the social policy, the real policy with the human beings, with the big ideas, the implementation of the rolling plans and all the rest. Africa is going through it, Nigeria is going through it, South Africa is smarting to it. We need to be able to stop the control of external control. I mean, how S&P just decide that the destiny of South Africa can be decided by just reducing the bond, just because we don't like the fate of the minister.
Thank you very much, Dinola. Thank you for calling us. We view that call as a very important call. Dinola, they're coming with a cocktail of what happens when you're trying to grow an economy. But let's take this other call from Simamkele from Pretoria. Simamkele, good afternoon and welcome to Rights and Recourse.
What do you say? I just had 2 questions.
Yes, Simamkele.
Hello?
Yes.
I have 2 questions for Minister of Land Distribution. One, what have we learned from land distribution from Zimbabwe? 2, does this transformation include employment? Because transformation without employment, it does not help anyone, it only helps the elite. So I wanted to get from that panel, what have we learned from Zimbabwe? Does transformation mean employment? Thirdly, the last question, I just want to check, are we a socialist country or a capitalist country? Thank you.
But you're asking the right person, because he made a comment around that this morning, Mr. Minister.
Zimbabwe. We had a visit. There was a visit here about 2 months or 3 ago, by the Deputy Minister of Agriculture. He said, don't just do things as we did. Rather learn lessons from what we have done and how we have done things, so that we don't get into the challenges that we landed ourselves. Secondly, employment. That's exactly what I was addressing. I was talking about a mind change, a change of a conceptual change in looking at the economy. To say, if you talk about growth through redistribution, that's how you will create jobs. Because as things are now, you can't create jobs, because what you're going to really be doing, you're going to build on the pillars of colonialism and apartheid. And those are the pillars that we must destroy in order to create new pillars of the economy, which will be based on redistribution of wealth of our country. That is how we will create jobs, because through that way we will expand the base of the economy. At the moment it's too narrow and the population is growing. That's a problem. Lastly, on capital, we are a mixed economy. Now, beautiful question. The mixed economy we're talking about has got 3 pillars. The private sector, the public sector, and the social sector. Those are including cooperatives, etc. That's how we shaped it. The problem we're having today is the dominance of the private sector, because of the colonial past and the way in which we have shaped ourselves, the orthodoxy I was referring to. You know what we have done is we have treated the state sector or the public sector and the social sector as only complementary to the private sector, whereas in fact the state and the social sectors should be treated as strategic pillars of building and redistributing the economy. That's what we need to do. And so that now we don't look at the economy and say, no, we're a capitalist economy as we are. That's what we must destroy, is the pillars of the capitalist economy, so that we strengthen, we treat public sector and social sector as strategic tools of the state to turn the economy around, to redistribute, grow the economy, destroy unemployment, inequality, and poverty.
In the time we have, gentlemen, I want us to go and talk about the role of ratings agencies. We've seen we've been downgraded by 2 ratings agencies, Fitch recently on Friday, and Standard & Poor. What a nice name for a ratings agency, Standard & Poor.
Yes, you know, I cannot agree more with what the minister just said. For me, for this thing to come from the ANC is really a breath of fresh air. This is what we've been arguing for decades. I mean, I am relatively young, but there's a tradition that has been consistently arguing from within the ANC that this is the path that we should take. So it's really refreshing and it's encouraging. Now, Standard & Poor's, they come in because now that the minister has said we need to destroy the pillars, the colonial pillars of the economy, and recreate new pillars that will take the country forward. Once we start doing that, we are upsetting power relations within the economy. We are upsetting movements of funds and wealth within the economy. We are going to be downgraded for that. So as South Africans, if we are really serious about this agenda, we should be prepared to absorb these downgrades, because we know that in the long term, we are building an economy in which everyone will walk tall and be and have dignity in this economy. I mean, the very foundation of racism in South Africa is based on the colonial structure and ownership of the economy. Once you destroy that, a lot of social cohesion, and most of the social cohesion that we want in this country will be realized. So I'm very, very happy to hear what is coming from the minister.
Well, the minister is quoted to have said this morning, for instance, I think somebody was asking, how do we prevent Moody's to do the same thing as Fitch and Standard & Poor? And the minister said, I quote, "It is something that when it happens, we go out there and shout. It's not something when we go out there, we go out and shout about it and shout against them. We are part of the world economy, and the world economy is dominated by capitalism, and these are some of the institutions of capitalism. As an open economy, these things will be there. But the question is how we as government position ourselves in such a way that we avoid these things happening." I don't know, Minister, you want to
yes,
restate that?
Exactly, that's a point here. Because you see, as long as you are part of the system, you have to comply with including the vagaries of the system. You have to comply with them, and that's where we are. But I can tell you, as soon as we change, as we have just said here, once you change, they know this is the direction you're going, and that's how they are going to rate you. They will rate you in terms of what you say you are. If we say if we remain to be what we actually inherited as a capitalist economy in South Africa, and we keep talking about a mixed economy without implementing that strategy, they are going to judge you on the basis of what is rather than what is to be. And that's a simple thing, and you can't blame them.
Dr. Maseramula, do you want to add to that?
No, in fact, also, I think I heard him earlier this afternoon. He was talking about decolonizing the economy, a popular concept in South Africa, which obviously is largely about what Chris said earlier on, destabilizing, the colonial pattern. And that much obviously is true that it's not going to be an easy exercise, but at the same time also we need to understand the reality within which we are operating. In other words, as we navigate our way through, and also in a way complying, because often we don't have any other option, we need to also in the process of compliance develop the capacity to influence the global thinking, because I think this is an opportunity that we have, that the ANC as the governing party could have an opportunity to sit down and debate some of these particular policies. We need to take that as an advantage. But earlier on also, I underscore the fact that all these policies that we are talking about need to be adequately situated within the real man in the street, so that when we start to defend our position on certain issues, that much will be based on the broader understanding of what we are defending.
Well, we'll continue having these discussions. The discussion is not over yet until the National Policy Conference. It was Comrade President Oliver Tambo who warned prophetically in 1997 in Angola. Comrades, you might think it is very difficult to wage a liberation struggle. Wait until you are in power. I might be dead by then. At that stage, you will realize that it is actually more difficult to keep the power than to wage a liberation war. People will be expecting a lot of services from you. You will have to satisfy the various demands of the masses of our people. In the process, be prepared to learn from our people's revolutions. That was prophetic, and we find ourselves at that stage.
Learn from the enemy also.
Exactly. I stopped halfway because I wanted some comments around that, because I wanted to go, I will go to learn from the enemy also.
That's right. Precisely. You see, this is exactly the point. Let me just say this point, which I wanted to say earlier on. Joe Slovo characterizes the way in which, the manner in which we ascended to state power as constitutional revolution. This is fundamental to the point of the Freedom Charter, for example. Now, if that is the case, and it is the case, we believe that that is the case, it means that we must keep on moving. These changes and these challenges we're faced with today should not surprise us if we accepted what Joe Slovo said. Because if we talk about constitutional revolution, it means that we, within the constraint of the Constitution, we must change. And the Constitution does allow us the space to change. What we should therefore be looking at is the political courage. It is the technical and managerial capacity. Once we of course, the things, you remember the Nigerian... the
caller from Nigeria.
He raises very critical issues that perhaps we didn't respond to, in terms of saying, look at these challenges.
And learn from Nigeria.
And learn from Nigeria. So we don't do these things. This to me is a key here. The key is that we must be prepared to face the challenges of change. If we look at what's happening today from that context, it's actually giving us impetus to move on. It's saying to us, don't feel too comfortable in the seats of government, because there's a lot that still has to be, you have to do. And we must see it as part of that revolutionary impetus. It's a punctuation of the comfort by this discomfort that we're feeling at the moment, because we're in government. So we can't be unhappy with what's happening. We should be happy.
Minister and Professor Malikane and Dr. Herbert Maseramula, thank you very much for this discussion. We should have more of these discussions. You will notice I didn't dwell too much. I didn't go in to talk about land reforms, because I want the minister to come here specifically to talk about that. And I am busy talking to your office, Minister, that you should come specifically to talk about this, especially Section 25 of the Constitution. President Oliver Tambo also said he must learn from the enemy also. The enemy is not necessarily doing everything wrongly. You may take his right tactics and use them to your advantage. At the same time, avoid repeating the enemy's mistakes. This has been Rights and Recourse. This program is repeated at 5 on Monday morning. Please do find us on YouTube and continue tweeting. And the views expressed on this show are not necessarily those of Rights and Recourse or the SABC. From all of us here in the studio and the crew, goodbye.